Hey y'all. I'm in office hours right now. Um, but I think I have a couple minutes. So I'm going to try to connect our user model to the rest of our Breaking Bad API or Breaking Bad uh app. And then eventually I'm going to link it up with CLI and then so that our CLI app runs again. We're not going to have all of the features yet because user will not yet connect to message at that point. And then the last thing I'm going to do in this recording is I'm going to create the has many through method, which allows us to finally sync up our entire app. So this is going to take place in three parts. First, I'm going to build out this user model to inherit from active record rather than how it's currently featured. Then next step, I'm going to debug my CLI.rb so that it works with the new active record requests. You'll notice that there are a couple of tools here that are AR methods that we've instead defined ourselves. So find by name, I'm going to need to double check that that works. Find or create, this is going to have to change to a find or create by. And then I think there's also like we're going to have to change this a little bit. So that's going to be the second part. And then the third part is I'm going to be defining a has many through, which is what I think most of you are here for. So I will first off share that. And then secondly, I'll share the timestamps in Slack. So to get started, first thing I'm going to do is we're going to go to our user model. We're going to inherit from active record base. And then in our migrations, we're going to do rake. It's getting to the point where rake, rack, everything is going to start getting really complicated. I'm sorry in advance. Create migration. See what they tell me to do. Rake db create migration. That was shameful. And it's taken its time, isn't it? Rake db create migration. Cool. Name equals create users. Hey, this case, they're exactly spot on. Cool. Now a user just has a username at this point. So we're going to go ahead and create that table. Create table user do t and t dot username t dot string username. Cool. Rake db migrate. You can test that this works. Rake console. We're probably going to get rake console. We're probably going to get a couple of errors on user because our old methods are still there. But if we call user.new, it actually is going to print it out for us. So we can comment this out, right? Because we didn't define a .new here. So now we can comment all of these bad boys out. Whoa. Cool. And then this has many messages and has many characters through messages. Let's go ahead and comment this one out now, because we know how to do that. First off, we need to change our message class. Our message class currently only has why did I call this Batman? Currently only has a character ID. So let's go ahead and add a new migration now. Rake db create migration. Add name equals add users to message. Cool. And now we can do, I think it's, is it add column? Let's go ahead and Google it. Whoop. Cool. Nice. So that's exactly what it is. I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this. This case, this is the table. So I'm going to go ahead and say that we're adding to messages, adding user ID, and we are going to make it an integer. Great. Rake db migrate. So now we can go ahead and on the message class, we can also say it belongs to a user. Yeah. And we can also say that a user has many messages. So just to be clear, you can have multiple belongs to's on the same model. That's totally fine. You can have a bunch of these. Next, we're going to test our work so far. Rake console. User.new. That works. We call message.new. You'll notice that it now has a character ID, message.all. Currently has a bunch of ones without any users. So I'm going to really quickly message.new. Let's test that again. First, let's create a new user. User.create username Batman. Cool. Now we can go ahead and message.last.user equals Batman equals user.first. Let's do this. M equals message.last. Let's do this in a couple steps. M.user equals user.first. M.save. Now if we look at our messages, last, we will see that it has a user ID of 1. We can also go ahead and call message.last.user. And it already allows us to do this because we have this belongs to user right here. We go from the other end, right? User dot first dot messages. We get that message again. So first off, let's double check our seeds at this point. We can now get to the point where we can kind of rewrite our seed file to work with all of our models. Yeah. So we can comment this one in. You can do Walt equals character.all.first. Instead of messages, add message, we can do messages.create, right? And here, one thing that I don't think I showed you that Active Record does is I can go ahead. Oh, right, I did just show you this. This is actually crazy that I can go ahead and say m.user equals user.first. User is not an ID. It's not user ID. Like user isn't an attribute on a table. But if I pass in user, it's going to know that what I want to instead do is set the user ID equal to that user's ID, which is crazy. So I can go ahead right here, and now I can say walt.messages.create. And I'm just going to go ahead, boop, 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 say content right here. And then where it says SpongeBob before, I'm going to go ahead and say user is SpongeBob. And because I create a variable called SpongeBob right here that's set equal to this user, it's going to go ahead and do this for me. It's going to go ahead and pass in the user ID as SpongeBob's ID. And because we're calling this on Walt, it's going to also pass in the character ID for Walt's character ID. This is all stuff that Active Record will just do for us. So I'm going to dump our database. So let's go ahead, user.destroy all, message.destroy all, and then I'm going to call character.destroy all. Cool. We'll exit, and now we just do rake db seed. Oop, I broke something. Notice this column users.username. There we go. And then I probably have to delete my characters again. Destroy all. Great. Rake db seed. And here we are. We can now rake console. Now if I go message.all, we've got 3 messages off from SpongeBob SquarePants. You can go ahead and say message.last.user right here. Now, there's a couple of other things that I wasn't really clear on this when we were walking through it in class, but in addition to methods that you define using has many, you can still define your own methods here. So one thing that we might find useful, right? We have in message user.username, right? This was an old method from before, but it should still work. And our character name method should also still work. And that's because what we're doing under the hood is we're calling this, right? And we have this user model from Active Record, and it makes it work. So pretty powerful stuff. So now we actually have quite a bit of our CLI app. We can double check this. So show characters is going to need character.all. We have that. User.print messages we haven't changed. Character.find by name is instead going to be is actually the same. This one works. User.find or create is now going to be find or create by username. Yeah. And then this add message method right here is instead going to be like dot messages dot create content user. Otherwise, I think we are probably good to go. Let's try this out. With the exception of there's one option, see the characters who you've messaged, that we won't have access to yet. We haven't set a way to get from your user to your characters. And that's going to be the third part of this recording. So we can exit this, break, run. Welcome, Breaky Buddies. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say my name is Patrick Star. Now Patrick Star can see all the characters, and these still load up. Oh, no, they don't. Undefined method join for, oh, that looks new. Okay, so in this case, I decided to, in my character class, create this join, which I don't need to do anymore because now I'm joining in my seed file. But the important thing to know, if you want like proof that I'm doing that, right here, that's where my join is. Join is strength. So that's one thing that I did where I didn't keep separations of concern separate right here. This like print detail is a little bit different than it was before. Patrick Star, try this out. See your characters. Walt Jr. We've got this information on Walt Jr. We can add a message to Walt Jr. Breakfast. Best meal of the day. And you'll now see you wrote breakfast, best meal of the day. And if I press 1, it'll say that Patrick Star wrote breakfast, best meal of the day to show that it actually saved with our user. Cool. And we can now go back to the main menu. We can see our own messages and it says to Walter Jr., breakfast, the best meal of the day. The one place where it crashes is see the characters you've messaged. Oh. It actually doesn't because I foolishly forgot to delete this method right here. And you'll notice this still works. This still works, but in here, we're actually not using Active Record for this table relation, which makes it pretty inefficient. If we wanted to actually just do, no, that's going to be a little bit confusing. We're going to comment out this method because this method wasn't given to us by Active Record. And then I'm going to show you that it breaks. Just really quickly. And we can go ahead and say Patrick Star. Again, we're logging back in. And now this breaks, right? It says, hey, you don't have a method characters yet for a user. But there's a couple of cool things that happen. If I write Patrick Star again, you'll notice that unlike before, these messages are now saved to a database. So our app now has a database, which is really exciting. So now we have to do our last step, which is just connect this user model to this character model. And the way we do this is really straightforward in Active Record. There's ways to make it more complicated, but by having many messages, we can now say has many characters through messages. And that's all we need to do. It's really important to know that this method has to exist first for this method to work. We're saying, first, we have many messages, but also you should use this relation to go a step further by saying through messages to characters. You can actually chain these. If you had another table right here, has many TV shows through characters, that's something you can do. But the important thing to know is that the order matters. And we can do this in the opposite direction too. We can go ahead and say has many users through messages. Let's go ahead and try this out. Rake, run. Patrick Star. See the characters I message. Now I can see Walter White Jr. right off the bat. So now we have everything we need. This is all you need to do to do a has many through. You don't need to add anything to messages as long as it already has both belongs to sides of the relationship. What it's doing under the hood is it's saying, hey, give me all the messages and then join that message table with the characters table and give me the characters. What it looks like under the hood is something like this. Select message or user dot star from characters, probably inner join. My capitalization is already getting bad. Messages. And that's why we need the has many before we can do the has many through. On messages dot user character ID equals characters ID. And then we just do this one more step. Users on users dot ID equals messages dot user ID. So this is really what def users is going to look like under the hood. But this is how a has many through works. And with it, we get a lot of different methods that all are kind of like our has many methods. We can actually go ahead and call user.characters, and we can like do cool stuff with it. You can't directly, I don't think, do like user.characters.new unless you pass in a lot of information about messages. But I would urge you to check the documentation for all the things you can do with has many through. Cool. All right. Happy Friday, everyone.